I didn't do it. Where's the remote? Oh, it's fine. We're not doing it today. Okay. You know, it didn't happen. I don't know. But we get the point. We're back in our study of Amos. All right. How's everyone feeling with this? All right. You know, we introduced it last week. We jumped into a prophet that I feel doesn't get a lot of attention. But he has, as we saw last week, a really big message for us all to be able to receive and understand. And so I want to just kind of review last week a little bit before we jump into where we're going this week. The big issue that was being addressed with the Israelites was that instead of influencing, they were what? Being influenced, right? And we had to really, that's what he was really trying to help them out. So he started off talking about the surrounding nations and what they're doing and laying them out. And they're like, yeah, get them. Rebuke them. Lay them out. The Israelites are all happy until he got on them and said, all this stuff that they're doing, you're doing it too. You're endorsing it. You're supporting it. You're just as guilty as they are. Right? And they were being called to task for, one, not taking care of the poor. Also denying justice to the oppressed. And ultimately forgetting God. Ultimately forgetting God. So we laid down, we went through all that stuff, kind of broke that down, how they were really getting challenged about this. And ultimately the goal that he was trying to communicate to the Israelites in Judea was this: God cares about people. God cares about people. He cares about his children. He created us, so he cares. So when he's watching you, his chosen people, stand by and not engaging, ignoring, matter of fact, endorsing behaviors that are oppressing and hurting other people, he's not going to be okay with that. It hurts him. And so we had to make sure we put aside all these other things that we allow distract us from what God's goals and intentions are for our lives. And that's what leads us to what we're going to be talking about today. Right? And so the last thing I ended with last Sunday was how to address it as a Christian. And I gave two things. Understand and engage. Not judge and ignore. And I think sometimes it's real easy for us to judge and ignore. But it's hard for us to understand. It's hard. We love to come to judgment. We love to say they are and we are this and they are that. And we love that stuff. But rather sit down and understand, why do you think this way? Why do you feel this way? Why is this happening? That is like a foreign language to our society. And to be able to engage those conversations, it takes a lot of courage to be able to engage, just so that you can gain understanding. It's so easy to just judge, make a judgment, and ignore, right? It's just easy. So it gets into our conversation today. Today, my big goal is this. The thing I want to share, and we're going to look at the scriptures, is this. Going through the motions of religious acts means nothing when the rest of your life isn't in obedience to God. Going through the motions of religious life means absolutely nothing when the rest of your life is not in obedience to Christ. And this is where he goes in the next few chapters and really laying in on this. Then he talks about this thing, locust, fire, and a plumb line. Anyone ever heard of that? Well, we're going to learn about it today. We're going to talk about this plumb line thing. So, do you guys remember early, like around 2013, we were just making a joke about 2013, but it was during, they had a memorial service for Nelson Mandela. And there was a major controversy during that memorial service. Anyone remember what that was? Yes. The sign language, right? Y'all remember that controversy? Right? This guy came out and was doing sign language, and And everyone's like, okay, that's this, but something was wrong with that. Y'all remember what was wrong with that?
Yeah.
It was wrong. That's what was wrong. Well, let me just refresh your memory real quick. Refresh your memory on the situation. So in this, that's the interpreter, and they're going to show an actual interpreter. Actually, it's going to pop up.
My president, Tom Mbeki.
Right here.
Leaders and excellencies,
The whole world's watching.
who have come to South Africa. This is Russia Marcel.
She's still going.
The Mandela family.
And he's going in.
The ruling
man's going in. He's serious.
Conviction.
Right? He got but isn't it? It's like it is conviction, right? Like the man, if you did not, how many of us understand sign language?
A little bit.
All right, keep those a little bit, right? A little bit. I don't. So at all, I have no clue. Huh?
A question.
Go ahead.
The sign language we learned here, is it national? Is it or is sign language global?
That's a good question.
I'm just asking.
That's a good question, yeah. Yeah. It's not like a universal.
Yeah. So I was wondering if it's universal.
Gotcha. But this guy, from what they said, it was no national, no regional sign language. It was just waving his arms in the air like he just don't care. That's all that was. You know what I mean? Like, and so we, when you go through and you're watching this, for those who don't know, right? You're looking at this, you're like, wow, that's okay, and he's doing his thing, right? You know what I mean? Like, okay. But for those who actually are impaired and trying to understand, you know what they're thinking? They're like, I don't know what's going on here, right? They are struggling in this, and so you're asking, okay, Terrence, what does this got to do with Amos, right? Like, why are you bringing this up? Well, the thing I want us to understand with this is that this is how people who are looking for God and need God in the world look at us when we're not living out our Christian faith and belief. They're looking at us like, wow, we need help. We need support. And we're waving our arms around in church, singing songs, doing all sorts of stuff. But who are we helping? Is our religion making a difference in the world? Or are we just gathering together, waving our hands like we just don't care? We really got to ask these questions because his actions were helping who? No one. No one. Matter of fact, it didn't help himself. Ultimately, right? Now, there's some other, I could have used a more recent situation to exemplify some of that, but I'm not going there. But this is something that we have to understand. In the world that we live in today, as disciples, as Christians, is your life making a difference? Is your religion, is your faith making a difference in the world that we live in today? Because a lot of people are going through the motions of religious acts, and they're absolutely doing nothing. Matter of fact, they're doing more damage. More damage. Because their life, their personal life, is not in obedience to God. Amos 5, he continues his the conversation. And here he says some stuff that's pretty intense. For chapter 5, verse 21, he says, and he's speaking on behalf of God. God says this, I despise your religious festivals. your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Did you bring sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, people of Israel? You ask this question. Did you bring this? Have you lifted up shrines? You have lifted up shrines of your king, the pedestal of your idols, the star of your God, which you made for yourselves. He ain't happy, to say the least. And the thing that he says, and he challenges them on, is it's funny how he uses this divine distaste is illustrated through God's senses, right? He talks about the stench, the smell, right? He talks about the listening, the sound of your music. He talks about, in the regards, the sight of what you're doing. Like he's like, every aspect of my being can't stand what you're doing. Can't stand what you're doing. These religious acts aren't helping anyone. He says religious festivals, assemblies, offerings, fellowship, music, and songs. It sounds a lot like what we just did today. Right? Sounds a lot like what we're doing right now. He says, until you start valuing justice and righteousness, until you start valuing justice and righteousness, and how you treat others, and how you value others. This is so big, guys. Because we can find righteousness, and we look for righteousness, we look for justice when it pertains to who? Ourselves, right? When we are wrong, we want what? Justice. No pun intended. Right? We want justice, right? We want that. We want to be right. We want to be made right. You hurt me, you need to pay it all back with interest. Yes. Right? I want it all. That's how we go about it. We deem righteousness through our acts and what we do. God's like, righteousness is defined by your obedience to me and how you value other people. You shouldn't be so focused on you receiving justice. Focus on you making sure others are receiving justice. Yeah. That's how you can gauge true righteousness. I love when he says here, verse 25, he says, did you bring me sacrifices and offerings 40 years in the wilderness, people of Israel? What's the answer to that? No. Yeah, they did. No, they did. They brought them. You know, you look at Exodus 24, you look at number 7. It exemplifies that they did bring sacrifices. But the difference between those sacrifices then and the sacrifices now is that back then, when they gave sacrifices, they had limited resources. Right? They had limited resources. They were poor. They were desperate. They were foreigners in the new land. But when you think about this, think about it, right? When you have limited resources and you have a humble perspective, you yield a deeper relationship with God. Right? When your back's against the wall and you got nothing else, isn't it easier for us to have like a crying out to God moment? Right? When you feel like there's nothing, I have nothing else, I'm desperate, God, I need you, right? That's when people like to come to church, right? You ain't seen them all year, but then it's like, I'm broke, I'm rent due, you know what I mean? Or something going on, I lost my job, my girl left me, you know, like it's like, I need to go to church, right? That tends to be it. When we're desperate and we're ready to give up everything, whatever, Lord, save me. That's our perspective, right? Now, Things start to get better. You get a little more money, jobs doing well, people love you, everything's good. Then what happens? Right? It's like, I did this. Right? It's really easy for us to become this I did this, to find pride in who? Self. And this is the same thing to them. See, contrary to the exuberant worship and festivals that the northern kingdom was doing, and when you go through it, you can read, the northern kingdom of the Israelites, when they worshipped, it was a show. It was a show. Right? It was huge, it was great, but ultimately it was hypocritical. It was so hypocritical. You know, what would the first century say about us and our worship, our assemblies? Would they say this is a little extravagant?
No.
Right? You don't think so? No. I got a fancy PowerPoint here, you know what I mean? Y'all sitting in comfy chairs, AC, a nice auditorium, a great sound system. You know what I mean? This bad boy just got updated. Like, we are, look, they're being streamed right now. There's people who at home looking at this, right? They ain't even here. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is an epitome of extravagant worship to the first century church. To the first century church, they're looking at like, man, these guys, looking all clean, all y'all smell good. Y'all got Bibles and you can read. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's like, man, we living a good life here. We are living a good life as a church. Everyone else, the first century, can look at us like, man, you guys are amazing. I wish we had that. We ducking and hiding just to fellowship. And risk of our lives. No one came here in risk of their lives. It didn't happen. It was the most inconvenient thing you had to do was wake up. Right? That was probably the most inconvenient thing. It was like, I've got to get up. You know what I mean? And you probably struggle with that. Like, well, I really need to go. I could watch it on Facebook. Right? You know, like that was the thing. That's why y'all laugh. See how you just told on yourselves. Right? You're supposed to be like, no. With all that extravagant level of worship right here, here's what's important. The first century are looking at it like, man, they're living it up. It's very extravagant. Here's what we need to ask them. What would God say? Would God call this hypocritical? Would God call your worship hypocritical? This is a question we have to ask ourselves. This isn't a congregational question. This is a you question. What would God say about this? You are partaking in this act of worship. What's the benefit? Are you really engaging the fellowship and this assembly for what it was created for? Or is this just your ritual? You are now gotten accustomed to a routine that you do every Sunday, every Wednesday. Right? That's the real question. What would God call this? Would he call it hypocritical? You know, James 1 talks about true religion. And it's not a pair of jeans. It says, verse 26, those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Now that in itself is a whole conversation piece about having a tight rein on your tongue. Some people just say stuff when they shouldn't be saying something. Some people be talking when they just need to be silent.
True that.
You know, and they think they're being spiritual with their lofty questions and all these other things, and really it's being detrimental. I digress. Verse 27, it says, religion that God, our Father, accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after the orphans and the widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by what?
Wow.
The world. This is religion that God, our Father, accepts as pure and faultless. This is what he accepts. It says, look after the widows and orphans in their time of distress, and do not become polluted by the world. Why widows and orphans?
They will take care of them. Poor people.
first century, who were probably the most vulnerable people during that time? Yeah, children and women. Probably the most vulnerable people at that time. And I think it specifically says widows. Why widows? Because they probably don't have someone to support them now, and everybody got their rights and stuff. But look, that wasn't the case in the first century. All that wokeness didn't work then. There was a system, and it was not to the benefit of women at that time. So if they didn't have somebody, it could have been what? It's difficult. So God's saying, look after the most vulnerable within your community. That's the religion that I accept. Are you concerned about the most vulnerable in your community, in your area? You know, and this is why as a church, especially here in Mercer, I'm so grateful that we have people like Horatio, we have people like Simone, who really help spearhead a lot for our church. A lot. You know, Horatio, when he does it nationally, I love the mindset of we need to, in our church, in our movement, our family of churches, there should be no one in our church that's hungry.
Right.
Yeah. In our family of churches, if they're part of our family and they have no food, no shelter, something's wrong.
Right.
And he's dedicated his life to it. How can we rectify that? How can we make sure in the church that that's not happening? Not just here, but internationally. We go out and we like to pat ourselves on the back. I did a mission trip and taught these people the gospel, but I ain't feeding them. I ain't helping them with shelter. You know, I'm just trying to make sure that they're disciplined. That's really like that. You know, children. That's what I'm saying. I was like, is somebody please help them? Right. Children, right? You know, that's it. You got to take care of them. You know, that's important. You can't get so caught up. You know, and I love that, and I love even Simone's heart, because you know sometimes we could get comfortable in church like, no, we're just gonna take care of church only, because that world is just nasty. So all those out in the world, they gonna get what they deserve. That's not it. Matter of fact, last week we talked about it. They were being called to task because they were ignoring all the other stuff around them. You know, and that's one thing I love, that Simone, she has that heart for and going in there, and how can we engage our community? This is our neighborhood. Let's not act like, yes, we take care of each other, but we also have a responsibility because we are saved, because we have this support system. You know, Ms. Barbara, you know, Zainab's gone. She left me. She's in Texas. She's doing it busy. So I've kind of had to kind of hold down the fort with the kids, and you know, I've seen my strengths during this few days, and I've definitely been made aware of my weaknesses. I definitely made aware of my weaknesses. The house reflects it. Okay? So I'm trying to figure out a plan before she gets back Monday, but I don't know. But anyways, needless to say, I digress. The thing that Barbara was sharing with me, which is deep, and we can have this mindset, which is true. She's like, you know, because she's like, how you doing? I was like, well, you know, I'm surviving. She's like, well, Paris, you're fine. Look at all the people here. If you need anything, you got tons of people that are here to support you. And I was like, you know, that's real. In the church, we have that. Yeah. We have tons of people. So we don't have to be so conscious. What about me?
Amen.
Right.
It's only like that when we just block ourselves off from people.
Amen. Amen.
Like if you're really embracing what we have in the church, you don't got to worry about that. Matter of fact, because you don't got to worry about that, now you are open to do what? Help other people.
Amen.
But when you are so in here, you ain't got the capacity
Right.
to think about someone else and to help someone else and help the brothers and sisters in need. And that's something we have to be engaged in. Yes, we're helping each other, but there are people in our surrounding areas, in our neighborhoods that need our help. And that's why we are so committed to engaging our communities and being that type of force for good and for God, to help bring justice and help other people. Like, that's important. You can't have Christianity and not have that as part of it.
Right.
That can't be part of our religion. They both are important, you know. And so the thing we have to ask ourselves, see the vulnerable people in our communities. Now, what about this being polluted component? That's a big deal. To keep yourself from being polluted by the world. What does that look like? You know, this pollution thing could mean a lot of different things to different people. And depending on what preacher you have speaking to you, they can call it great acronyms and different things to kind of break this thing down. And you guys don't have a great preacher, you have an average one, so I don't got a great acronym for you. I'm sorry, all right? But here's what I do have, all right? I have an idea. I have a perspective. And I want us to really think about this, because when it comes to being polluted by this world, there's a lot of things we could talk about. We talked about a lot of stuff, the sins, the ideology, all these different things. Here's the thing I want us to focus on, the distraction. I want us to focus on the distraction.
Right.
Because this world wants to distract us from a lot of things. You know, there's a book, a really good book I like, called Crazy Love by Francis Chan, right? And he has a quote, I want to share this quote with you guys. He says, in the book, he says, that our greatest fear as individuals and as a church should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. Like, this should be our greatest fear. Of succeeding, not a failure, but succeeding at things that really don't matter. At the end of the day, he says, as a disciple of Jesus, we have to do things that cost us during our time on earth, but will be more than worth it in eternity. This is what he calls us to. This is what the gospel calls us to. Right? And I think for us, I think we're real used to getting caught up in the opposite thing. I like to call majoring in the minors. Right? We really get caught up in majoring in the minors, right? I got a couple questions for you. Right? How many of us are in a stage, because we're all in different stages, everyone in this, a very diverse group, right? And in that different stage of life that you're in, that could become your focus, right? We have different, right now you are in a stage, and that is your focus. Some of us are in this stage right here, trying to get that degree. How many of us are in the degree stage, trying to get the degree, right? There we go. We got people, we got a whole row of people that are in that degree stage, right? They're trying to get that degree, and that becomes your focus. You are fixated on that. The thing that stresses you out the most isn't that people are suffering. It's, I got to get this degree, right? You know what I mean? I'm trying to get that paper, right? That's it. And I mean, this piece of paper right here. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm trying to get. And so that's your focus. Some of us are at that stage where that is all we could think about. That's it. That causes our greatest distress. You know what I mean? Is this. Trying to get that. Some of us, we're not at that stage. We're at this stage. We're trying to get that job, right? Some of us trying to get that job, trying to upgrade the job, trying to get a better job, right? Some of us are at that stage. How many of us are trying to get the job stage, right? We got some job people too. Trying to get this job. This is the thing that you are focused on. It demands all your attention. It stresses you out. You have trouble sleeping. You get irritated with your friends because they talk about their job, and you're like, I don't want to hear about your job, right? You just struggling, right? It's just a tough time, but that's the stage that demands all your focus. Some people, they get that money. They got the job. They're trying to get the bag. Get the bag. They're trying to get money. That is it, right? You know, that's their focus. You got the job. Now you're just trying to secure the bag. You're just trying to make sure you can upgrade. How do you do this? What does this look like? You know, and this is the focus that some of us are in, right? We're there. This is the world, that's the time we're in. Some of us are trying to find a spouse. You know? We're trying to find a spouse. That's what it becomes the part that we're stressed with, that we're focused on. You know, someone's trying to get rid of a spouse. No, I'm playing. I'm playing. But that's our focus, right? We're trying to get the spouse. stuff, and that becomes a great level of distress, of focus. We compare ourselves to other people. We're looking at a clock saying, I'm getting older, and it ain't happened, and you're discouraged, right? That happens to people, and that they're not thinking about anyone else, about people who are suffering. They're focused on this. This is my focus. Some of us have gone past that. We're trying to get that house.
Yeah.
And trying to get a house, that demands all your attention, right? You're trying to upgrade your life. You're trying to get a house. That in itself is a stressor and a thing that just overwhelms people. Some people go past that. They're at this stage where we want to have kids. I just want a kid, and we're trying to get kids, right? That's what we're focusing on. Children, child rearing, some of us are trying to have children, some of us trying to get rid of children. You know what I mean? Like, how can I get rid of these kids I got? I need to get them out the house. I'm done with them. That's your focus. That's what takes all your attention. The kids are stressing you out. You know what I mean? I know someone's just really happy because she's going to Ryder. She's going to be out the house. This happens at times, right? We just be like, move on. We trying to push them out. That's the mindset. And then some of us is trying to get that pension or retirement, right? Then we at that stage. I'm just trying to get done. I'm just trying to get to the end of the line. And that is your focus. That is what you are focused on, that demands all your attention. That's what you spend your time and attention focusing on. How can I secure my retirement? How can I secure this pension or whatever it is? And the sad thing is, as much time and attention that we put on these things, do you know how you can lose it? Man. Right? And you spent hours of focus, of attention, of stress to get this stuff, and it's gone. And you know what happens when you lose it? Oh my goodness. When you built your whole life on that, it could destroy you. It could destroy you. And we put so much time and attention on things that are so temporary. And so when I talk about this pollution, pollution, it blinds us, makes us sick. It doesn't help us to stay focused. It distracts, covers things up, right? Just think of smog and kind of rest over. You can't see. This is dangerous. The pollution of this world will distract you from God and God's priorities. Because really, that's all that matters. At the end of it, the things that God's saying, valuing people, loving people, that's really all that matters. And I know it could be like, no, but parents, you don't understand. And I'm not speaking as like, I am that guy. Like, I've arrived where I could care less about any of these things. That is not what I'm saying. Hear me. Right? I struggle with these things as well. And it's like, but we got to understand, we are in a world that really wants you to focus on this stuff. And it's a fight to not get so focused on this and not focus on what God's calling us to. And then it's things that are like heavy that bring us back into perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Something tragic happens. A tragedy happens. A situation happens where you're like, oh, I'm not even thinking about that, but that could be me. And it has to bring us back. And sometimes I'm like, man, does it always have to be something tragic to get us back in line with God's priorities? We got to get back in line with the things that God has called us to. God shares something in Amos addressing this very topic and trying to help with this. And he shares this in chapter 7. He goes on, he talks about God is frustrated. Yeah, obviously he's been frustrated with this whole book, right? With the people of Israel. And he's been laying them out, really just making the case for them. And then in chapter 7, starting this is the question we have to ask ourselves. Are we tilted towards God or the world? Like, we have to ask ourselves this. Especially as we engage in this next day. Like, what are we tilted towards? Like, what's our focus? Is it really on the things that God is calling us to, or is it this world? And the things of this world. And in this, he starts laying this list down, right? And he's like, look, I'm done with them. I'm about to bring my judgment upon them. And this is what the sovereign Lord has shown me, says Amos. He was preparing, so it goes through and he talks about he was preparing the swarms of locusts to come, devour everything, destroy everything. And then Amos was like, hey, God, don't do that. You made a promise about Jacob. Remember, if you do that, you're going to destroy all that. Don't do that. So God's like, all right, I'll relent. I'm not going to do it. Then they keep going, right? And then God's like, all right, I'm done. I'm bringing fire. It's a wrap, and I'm burning up everything. My judges will come, and he's like, and Amos again, God, forgive them. Show mercy. Don't do this. If you do that, you made a promise. Remember to Jake, don't do this. And he's like, all right, I'm relent. And then they keep going, and at the end he goes and he says this, and this thing kind of puzzled me for a minute, right? He says in verse 7, this is what he showed me, right? There's 3 different visions that he showed me. This is the third one. He showed me the Lord was standing by a wall that had been built, true to plumb, with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord asked me, what do you see, Amos? A plumb line, I replied. Then the Lord said, look, I am setting a plumb line against my people, Israel. I will spare them no longer. And so in reading that, I was like, wow, that sounds heavy, but I don't know what in the world a plum is. I mean, I know what a plum is. They taste really good. It's actually my favorite fruit. But that's actually not what he's talking about. I was sitting here trying to visualize that. What in the world? Why is he setting a plum against the people of Israel? Like, I didn't understand that. Well, knowing me, y'all know that I kind of understand things at a more basic level. And so I have a video to show you that's going to help me understand this a little more, and hopefully it'll help you guys understand it. It definitely helped my son Sean understand it, so it might help you guys. All right?
Meet Amos the prophet.
He doesn't look like a prophet.
No? What does a prophet look like?
To be chosen to be the messenger to God's people, you look holier, like with a halo, a big beard, or a stick.
He's got a stick.
Yeah, but that looks like a shepherd's stick.
Well, this prophet was a shepherd, and he was a fig farmer.
He raised sheep and pigs?
No, not pigs. Figs. Pigs don't grow on trees. That's a fig tree.
Well, he sounds pretty ordinary.
He was an ordinary guy with an extraordinary message. God chose Amos to give the king some really bad news.
What was God's message?
Amos told the king he saw a vision of God sending grasshoppers to eat up the crops.
Oh no, that's bad.
But God said it wouldn't happen. Then Amos told the king he saw a vision of God sending fire to dry up all the water.
Now that's bad.
But that wouldn't happen either. But then Amos told the king he saw a vision of a plumb line.
A row of fruit?
Not a plumb line. Plumb line. The B is silent.
I have no idea what that is.
In the vision, God stood by a wall that was built with a plumb line. He used a plumb line to see if it was still straight. That's how the plumb line works. You hold it up to see if something's straight.
The plumb line is straight because gravity pulls it down.
Exactly.
But if it was built with a plumb line, of course it was straight.
But it wasn't straight anymore.
Grasshoppers and fire sound way worse than a crooked wall, though.
This was really bad. The wall represented God's people. God saw their hearts had become crooked.
How does your heart get crooked?
God gave laws to teach them to live his way, but they lived their own way. They quit caring for the poor. They cheated people in their businesses. They didn't worship him properly. They even worshiped other things. Over time, their hearts went from straight to crooked, from like what God wanted to whatever they wanted.
What's worse than grasshoppers and fire?
What happens when a wall gets more and more crooked?
Oh, I get it now. The whole wall was going to fall down.
Exactly. God warned the king that because the people stopped living straight, the whole crooked kingdom would crumble.
I don't want my heart crooked.
Me neither. We can stay straight with God by lining up our life with how the Bible says to live.
God's word can be our plumb line.
Exactly. Plumb with a big B.
A little basic, but y'all got the point, right? Y'all get the point? And it helped. It helped me to kind of get this. And the thing that's really deep is this. When we ask, what would the plumb line say about us? You know, I love how in verse 7 it says the wall was built true to what? Plumb. Someone said it. A kid said it. See, that worked. Maybe I just interpreted it that way. But he said the wall was built true to plumb, meaning originally, right? The wall was built what? Straight. Originally, the wall was built straight up and standing. And, you know, when you actually look at the definition of plumb, it's exactly vertical, right? Straight up, same thing, right? And he says he's setting up a line, and he's asking, are you still that way? Are you still straight up? Or are you tilted? Are you tilted? Are you still straight up, or are you a little off? The plumb line shows us, you know, that the world that we live in that could pollute us in such a way that we're just off center from what God wants us to be. We're just off center. And what's very unique here is that when he says that, I'm gonna, you know, before he's kind of like, I'm gonna bring locusts and get them. And then he says, I'm gonna bring fire and get them. But then he says, okay, I'm just gonna stand a plumb line up right next to them. And that's kind of unique, right? Like, cause it's like before he's like, I'm gonna just destroy them, pretty much. But then with this one, is he doing the destroying? No. What's actually gonna happen? They're gonna destroy themselves.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Very.
He's like, I'm not even gonna, you're gonna do this to yourself. You're gonna keep letting things tilt you off center,
Right.
and you're gonna fall.
Right.
I'm just putting this here so you can see how to get yourself straight again.
Amen.
And this is the thing that we have to understand as Christians. We have to ask ourselves, man, what would the plumb line say about us?
Right.
I had to ask, I was going through this sermon on myself. I'm like, what would the plumb line say about me? Like, scratch, I could read all the spiritual books in the world. I could do all the things, I could preach, I'm here, we all this stuff. Man, but if I'm hurting people, if I'm not caring about how my actions and how my life is treating other people and how my ignorance could affect other people, you know, I'm sitting here and, you know, we talk about all these things, and sometimes I'm like, man, are we really sharing our faith like we need to?
Right.
Are we out there helping people like God called us to? Or are we just distracted with that long list of things? Good stuff, right? Good stuff. Could be a great tool in of itself. Actually, matter of fact, a lot of that stuff is very necessary. I don't want everyone walking around saying, parents say that we should focus on degrees and all this stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it should not supersede what God has called you to.
Right. Right.
And that's loving people.
Amen.
That's caring about people. That's making sure that we're there for people. God has given us everything we need so that we can focus on that. So that we can be his vessel towards that. You know, we've all been hit by the pollution of this world. The question is, are you cleaning yourself up?
Wow.
It's inevitable. We're in the world, it's dirty. All right? You're going to get dirty. Okay? That's inevitable. The question is, are you cleaning yourself up?
Right.
And actually, it's not even appropriate that I say, are you cleaning yourself up? Because you really can't clean yourself up based on what we read through scripture, right? If you put the plumb line next to your heart, you'll see if your heart's polluted. Will you see if your heart's polluted, or will you see Jesus? And that's the thing we got to ask ourselves. Are we really leaning into Jesus like we're called to as Christians?
Wow.
Are we really leaning into that? What he's called us to. And who he's called us to be. Because you can't fix yourself. It's just like my car. I own the car. The lights go out, which they continuously do. You know, and I try to fix it. Sean loves to remind me about, you know, I mean, which is fine. I'd rather him than the cops remind me. So it's totally good, right? But I can't try to go in there myself and fix it. I gotta take it to who? A mechanic. I either take it to the dealers, the people that built it, or a mechanic who understands the manual and can fix it, right? That's the same thing with us. We got to take ourselves back to the person who created us and the people that probably understand the word enough to help us with it.
Right.
That's how it is. This is not a solo thing. A lot of times we feel like I got to fix myself. You can't fix yourself. You are where you are because of yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this is what you do. You get here, and you're not happy. So get help. Get help. If it's accepting Christ and getting to and really becoming a disciple, get the help. Talk to people. Allow people to influence you. Stop running from that. But engage that process. It's not to hurt you. It's only to your benefit. And if you are a disciple and you're jacking up, get the help.
Right.
If you see, man, my actions are not showing a heart of love and care and really trying to bring justice and righteousness to this world, it's really just about building up myself. Get the help.
Right.
Let's engage this. Reality is this. The plumb line will be standing beside all of us. All of us. We were created the way God actually intended. Are you letting the world change you? Are you letting the world change you? And if you are, that's fine. We've all been there. Are you going to let God restore you?
Amen.
Let's let God restore us.
Amen.
Let's not let this be a signal of judgment, but let it be a signal of hope that we can change.
Amen.
That this can be better. Amen?
Amen.
To God be the glory. Thank you, guys.